We would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today, the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung and Bunurong peoples. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Welcome to On Air Snack Bar, the podcast where we take you inside the world of entertainment with interviews from your favourite stars, creators and industry icons in Australia. I'm Lucy Durack, your host for all things theatre and musical theatre, and this is On Air Snack Bar. Hello, today I have the pleasure of chatting with an Australian stage and screen legend. He has starred in shows like Les Mis, Hair, Sweet Charity, Mamma Mia and many, many more. He is currently playing Larry Murphy in Dear Evan Hansen. Hello and welcome, Martin Cruz.
Hello.
Hi, Marty.
How you doing?
Oh, I'm so thrilled to have you here.
So thrilled to be here. This is very professional.
Isn't it? We can just have a chat and then just happen to have some cameras.
Yes.
I had the great pleasure of seeing you in Dear Evan Hansen not that long ago, and oh my gosh, can I just say you do such a wonderful job. It's such a beautiful production, and you and Nat are so wonderful together. Nat O'Donnell, of course, who plays your wife, and it's just excellent. Congratulations, first and foremost.
Thank you.
And can I ask what drew you to this project?
Predominantly, well, the music is amazing.
Yes.
And I already knew the music. In fact, I'd seen the show on Broadway, but in the sort of lead up to the auditions, I read the script. I don't think I'd actually read the script, as in terms of looking at the structure and everything, and I just thought, it's like a play with music. And I thought it was just a brilliant analysis of the all of the issues that it covers, and to be able to, as you would know, the opportunity to do that kind of dramatic material in musical theatre is, those opportunities are few and far between. So I was, particularly interested by that.
Absolutely. And you do such a good job of it. How do you find, and I'm curious to know how you, and Nat particularly, since you are both parents in real life, and I'm not giving anything away for anyone who hasn't seen it because it happens very early on, that the character who plays your son takes his life and you have to go through that 8 shows a week. Do you have a certain way of kind of compartmentalising, or how do you go about emotion? Because it's very realistic. You and Nat do such an excellent job of making it very real, and it was really moving to watch. But that's a lot to sort of stir up emotionally.
Yes. So I personally, I'm not interested in using my own
life experience.
As material to get me emotional. I take myself out of the character for the moment and see the character externally. So I've had the experience. You worked with Larry Moss, didn't you?
I know of Larry Moss.
Yeah. So I did a lot of his classes when he was here, and there was one, I think it was outside Mullingar, this play that we were had seen from this fantastic John Patrick Shanley play.
Yeah.
And it's very kind of emotional, this particular character I was playing, and I kept having trouble getting through the line.
Yes.
I'd just start crying.
Yep.
And he said to me, he stopped me and he said, "Yeah, but Martin, the character, is proud of what he's doing." And I realised that I was looking at the character from the audience.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And going, this poor guy.
Yes.
And so then when I actually stood in the shoes of the character, he actually was being very selfless and proud of what he was doing. So then I was immediately able to
keep going,
get through without getting emotional. And so I do the opposite of that.
Right.
So, when I break down at the end of Act 1, I'm actually crying for Larry Murphy.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Rather than having to mess around.
Like he's a friend almost.
Or any, because all human beings, we're all amazing. We're all struggling with everything that it's, And so any character that I play, I can be a champion for.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that moment, because as having seen the show, Larry's very stoic and he's angry. And then, I just sort of look at him from the outside and I go, you poor man, what's happened to you and how you're trying to cope.
Yes.
And so therefore I'm genuinely moved. And then as soon as I walk off stage, it's gone. I'm not sort of caught up in any connection to my own life and my loved ones.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. It's almost like watching it on the news or something and having it separate from yourself.
Yes, because you can go, you watch it on the news and you go, those poor people. And
that's smart choice. Because I think when you start out, you're just trying to access that emotion, however it is, and then you realise, oh wow, doing this 8 times a week. We have so much neuroplasticity in our brain that can shift so much. I think you've got to be really careful about going about these in the right way, especially as you get older, or especially as you're doing things in long runs.
And also you can use something in your own life, but it'll run out.
That's true.
Like it can almost be like therapy.
Yeah.
Where you're
sort of
using
cathartic.
some event, and then eventually you go, I'm over that now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Thank you to that show.
So
what next?
Whereas I know that, whatever character I may play in the future or whatever, I can always view their struggle, their bravery, their because everybody's trying to do their best.
Yeah.
And however misguided they might be, having that sort of external perspective, as you say, it's like watching a film where you get moved watching the film. I just sort of, for a moment, I sit in the audience and go, oh, poor Larry.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's really smart. And it's a pretty small group of you in Dear Evan Hansen, 8 of you.
Mm-hmm.
And you seemed really tight, and you obviously are going through something quite emotional all together as a group. And there's obviously the 2 sort of generations. How have you navigated that as an elder in the cast? And do you have anything that you do together, pre-show, any kind of rituals? How do you maintain this sort of tight-knit little group?
Yes, well, I think actually the fact that there are 3 sort of older cast members, as you mentioned, Natalie O'Donnell, and then Verity Hunt-Ballard, who plays Evan's mother. And then these incredible, 5 younger people in their, I think George is 19, I think,
wow.
And the rest of them in their early 20s, mature beyond their years. I think that dynamic is actually a great kind of setup. I think it's almost like apparently the optimum group size is 5 to 7 and we're 8, and so it's been the smoothest sort of rehearsal tech production period that I've ever experienced, I think. And right at the beginning of previews, Dean Bryant, the director, he set up this thing where the cast would hold hands and get in a circle backstage, and he said, "Dear Evan Hansen, today's going to be a great show, and here's why." And he would come up with a reason, and then we'd go around the circle and each say one thing, and we've maintained that. That's part of our pre-show ritual every show, and particularly when, as you were saying earlier, there were, I think, 3 of our standby. We have 5 standbys, obviously some of whom are covering more than one role. And so particularly when one or more of them come in to join the circle, it's a special new energy. And
I see. So it's just the people who are about to go on and do the show. The standbys don't do it unless they're on that show.
Although, sometimes you have, as part of their track, they'll follow their cast member around backstage. So, and we've had the odd mech come in and join the circle with, there's no...
it's not exclusive.
It's not exclusive,
That's nice.
But generally it's just the cast.
Does that sometimes make you emotional? Because even just me hearing you say that, knowing the show and having seen the show, Dear Evan Hansen, today's going to be a great show or whatever it is that you say, it made me feel like, I can.
Yeah.
Does that ever happen, or is it usually more just pumping you up?
There have been moments where certain people have got emotional for one reason or another. Quite often a common thing that people will say is going to be a great show because I just love being here with you guys, or
nice.
I feel so privileged, and particularly now where, as I said, one of the things I said on last night, the Sunday night show was this time next week we'll be in single digits of shows left.
Gosh.
And so, particularly now we're really relishing this experience that we're sharing together.
That's beautiful. Marty, do you remember when the theatre bug first beat you?
I do very much. I reckon I was between 3 and 5 years old. So my father was born and raised in Wellington in New Zealand, and he would have been an actor. I mean, when I say he would have been an actor, he was an actor. He would have been a professional actor. However, in New Zealand at that time, there was no professional theatre in the whole country.
Really?
Yeah.
What year is this?
Early 1960s.
Okay.
And my mother was born in Dublin, grew up in the north of England, and her eldest brother, after he left the army, he met a New Zealand girl, and they got married in Wellington, and my mum came to Wellington. And so the biggest theatre company, amateur theatre company in New Zealand was the Union Players, and my dad was the president.
Oh, wow.
And my uncle was a member of the Union Players. So then my mum, who was interested in theatre, she joined the Players, and that's where my parents met.
Oh, my goodness.
And they then got married in Wellington and then travelled back to London, and I was conceived on the boat.
Romantic.
Yes. So I have very, very vivid memories of attending rehearsals. So my dad joined an amateur theatre company in West London called the Questers, which they must have had subsidy because they had this theatre. They're still going. They had this theatre centre which had 2 main stage theatres and a studio theatre. They had 2 bars. There was a loading dock. They were more subsidised than a lot of the professional theatres in Australia now. And you had to audition to become a member of the company. And when my dad first joined, Tom Stoppard was artist in residence.
Oh, my
there.
gosh.
And he, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, was first performed at the Questers as a 1-act play. And so we would spend weekends at, run around the theatre and things. And so I have memories of watching rehearsals and things, and literally the smell of the grease paint, because that back in those days the makeup was
grease paint.
Yeah, my dad had this sort of tin of grease paint.
My goodness.
And that smell is such a potent smell for me. And I remember sitting it was in the studio theatre watching 2 actors on stage, and I can't remember if one of them was my dad or not, but I just had this thought, and as I say, I was probably 5 years old, and I went, I can do that, and that's what I'm going to do.
Oh, my goodness.
But I didn't then go, so I better go to class.
Right.
Or I better get busy learning. I went, I'm going to ride my bike until I'm discovered.
Right.
Walking down the street.
Great. Good plan.
Yeah. And it wasn't until I'd left high school and sort of travelled Europe a bit, and I came back and I hadn't been discovered. I thought I'd better actually take this a bit more seriously. And that's when I auditioned for WAPO.
Oh, that's kind of perfect though, because I don't know if you feel you've got a son, Hunter, who's very talented. I have 2 children who are interested because they're around it so much. And I go a lot between going, well, I was so lucky. My parents didn't know, I didn't come from a theatre background. And my parents just supported me, even though to them, obviously, it's a terrifying thing to go, sure, have a go in this uncertain industry. And I now know how uncertain the industry is. And I think, I want my kids to have a normal childhood. But going back to what you were saying is you kind of gave yourself a normal childhood and then went into it. So it was kind of, I think that's a good way around.
I didn't feel inspired. I didn't know that. I mean, I remember they did, a panto. It's England, so they had pantos at Questers, and there were a couple of the other kids were in the show.
Right.
And I didn't go, unlike Hunter, my son, who, we've had to deal with him going, how come I'm not in that, I was like, what are you doing? You've walked out and you've got rabbit ears on and, it
didn't feel right.
So I just sort of had this thing of like, when I'm old enough, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Oh.
It was kind of weird that I wasn't hungry to do classes or anything. But
no, that's your path, your journey.
Yeah.
So you then went and studied at WAPA.
At WAPA, yeah.
And did you have a big break after did you have a big break where you're like, oh my gosh, this is it? Or was it a sort of slow progression into the industry?
So interestingly, in terms of my time at WAPA, because I did the musical theatre course, I was third intake.
Wow.
The course was only 3 years old. And the first year there were only 2 students. And then the second year there were maybe 6 or more, and that was Rodney Dobson, Glenn Hogstrom. They were both
good. Such good people.
Yeah, and however, I wanted to be an actor,
right?
And I missed the auditions for the theatre course, and I just started doing an amateur show, a play. And one of the people in the cast said, why don't you audition for musical theatre? And I'd never heard the term before. And I was like...
You're like, it'll be the rabbits and I'm not interested in that.
Yeah. But I didn't... I was like, I had a vision of a musical, like a wind-up musical theatre.
Right.
It's like, musical theatre? What's that?
What?
And she said, I auditioned last year, I got in. Anyone can get in, And so I went, well, I'll audition for that. I'd actually auditioned for the media performance course already.
Right.
So I auditioned and literally I was so late with my application that John Milson, who created the course, phoned me up and he said, look, there's no time. You can, we need 2 monologues, but you can literally read them off the page and bring a couple of songs. And I just started to have singing lessons that, I was 19.
Yeah.
And had a couple of, but it took me years to learn to sing. I couldn't sing,
Wow.
Yeah.
And because you're such a legit singer, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's just for some reason I was like, I'm going to master this thing. And then so went in, and then I think it was a Sunday I auditioned, and then the dance call was the next day. That's how must have been one of the last students that auditioned. And then to answer your question, got in.
Brilliant.
And and then had the summer, and then arrived sort of first day of term the next year, and I was like, what is this thing? This is, and you'd walk down the halls and there's people singing in one room and there's dance classes going on. It was like fame, But the thing was, all of my classmates, because Lisa McCune was in my class and Lara Mulcahy, Tim Lawson.
Amazing people.
Yeah. And they all had musical theatre record collections and they knew all the shows and everything, and I knew nothing. So, which was actually probably a good thing, because I was like, well, head down, bum up. I've got to work so hard to even, get to their level.
Did they have, my experience of going through WAPA was that incredible library that just had every Broadway and West End cast recording ever.
Yes.
Did they have that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And did you had Milson, didn't you?
Yeah, we had Milson just for theory though. He was Dennis Follington, head of the course for my first year, and then David King took over for my second year.
Okay, yeah.
But Milson used to teach us history of musical theatre.
That's right. So that's what he ran the course when I was there. But
so passionate.
Yeah.
What an amazing guy.
His history of musical theatre was so informative.
Yes.
Had that book that you had to buy.
Yes.
And so he would cover a different or a different composer, I think, each week, wouldn't he?
Yes.
And then you could go to the library and they had all of the, the Lincoln Centre.
Yes.
And Follies and, Sunday in the Park with George and all of these amazing shows that you could sit and watch the video, the VHS video of, these amazing Broadway shows with Mandy Patinkin and all these Bernadette Peters, incredible people.
Incredible. So great. Yeah, my memory of being at WAPA was just the same sort of thing. I actually think I got in because somebody turned down a place. I think I didn't get in. And then, so I knew the day that everybody was finding out and I hadn't found out and I was devastated. And then later in the day, I got a call from Dennis Follington saying, would I accept a place? And I was like, oh my God, yes, quick, sign it, anything, fax it off in those days. I was so excited. But I too then worked really hard and I spent so much time in that library and, on the weekends. And it was just such a great vibe where everybody was in those studios practicing their tap dancing or their poem or whatever it was that you were doing that week. Multiple things and, working really 7 days a week plus trying to work a job to try and make a bit of money. But I remember when my first job was in the ensemble of Mamma Mia and the great stage manager, Mary Ben, sent me home. She said, you've done too many hours. And I was like, these guys are so slack. Because we'd worked such long hours at WAPA and I feel like professionals were, there are certain, for good reason,
I think
limits to hours.
Second or third year, I was doing 80 contact hours.
It's mental.
And then trying to write a 5,000 word assignment and then, as you say, work a job to earn money. Yeah. Luckily, I was living at home and had full support from
Me
my
too.
parents. Yeah.
So lucky. I know. I was one of two in my year who was at home. Everybody else was from the Eastern States.
Yeah.
And then when you left WAPA with your university degree, surprise,
in hand,
did you just head out and start auditioning or did you have a big break moment or?
Yeah, well, kind of. So they did the audition program thing.
Like the showcase.
The showcase, yeah. And I'd had an offer of representation from Gary Stewart in Melbourne, Melbourne Artist Management, he was called. He's no longer with us, Gary Stewart. And I can't remember exactly how, but when we were in Sydney, I auditioned for a production of Romeo and Juliet, like the play, not a musical, and which was being performed in Singapore. And basically, long story short, I got cast as Romeo, and my girlfriend at the time, Charmaine Clements, who was in my class,
amazing,
was cast as Juliet.
Oh, how romantic!
Yeah. So I think we sort of, and then so I phoned Gary Stewart and said, "Love to take up your offer," and I've just been offered this job, and then sort of went home to Perth for Christmas, summer, and then
went to Singapore.
Yeah, we rehearsed in Sydney, right. And he was great, Damien Parker. Pretty sure that's his name. It was a masterclass in Shakespeare, and I remember him talking about the genius of the creators of language and how onomatopoeic it all is, and so he took us. It was only just Charmaine and I rehearsing this particular day, and he took us into the kitchenette area we were rehearsing in Balmain, and he turned the tap on, and he said, "What? Make up a word for that." And so we were going, splosh, because he was saying, like for example, in the balcony scene, what light through yonder window breaks. That word tells you that the light's just come on, because it's not shines. What light through yonder window shines? It's breaks. It's gone.
Yeah.
And it was like a light bulb moment. And then we was rehearsing later on. We were pretty well off book, and we were doing the balcony scene, and I went. It is the east and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, who kills the envious moon. And I said, she's like an angel that floats upon the bosom of the air. And I stopped myself and I went, is it floats? And they were like, because no one was on the script.
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
went, yeah, angel that floats upon them. And I was like, it just floats. It's floats. It feels floats, doesn't sound
doesn't
like.
feel
yeah.
right.
So they got the script and it was sails. Angel that sails.
You're like, perfect.
Yeah. And then came back from that to Melbourne. And because we lived in Melbourne for the first 5 years after WAPA, and that's when I got a job in a pub. And
Yeah. No one escapes that, do they? Like, I don't think anyone, I mean, there might be one or two, but I don't think many people escape. You maybe get lucky at the start, but then you have your moment where you go, I
think it's
good for you.
It's good for you. You get to meet people from different walks of life and observe, different social situations and so on.
Definitely.
And then I got a job as an usher on the original production of Phantom at the Princess Theatre.
Wow.
And then I got essentially what was my then first job leading into, what was my first sort of musical, was Noddy Goes to Toyland for Gary Ginnivan.
Oh, my gosh.
Playing Mr. Plod.
Oh, fun. That's so great. And then the rest is history, as they say. You played so many incredible roles. Do you have one that sticks out as being the most joyful?
I mean, whenever anyone asks me about significant roles, I straight away think of The Man from Snowy River Arena Spectacular, but I've been so lucky in my career, and when you say joyful, I absolutely loved Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I just had a ball performing that show. The costume and the choreography and the vibe of it.
Yep.
And it was short. It was like over in 2 hours and 10 minutes.
I love that.
So that was a particularly joyful experience. But then, as I say, doing The Man from Snowy River, where you're, when you're in a show and you work, you connect with another actor, and or something might go wrong, and you're like, and then go to the pub afterwards.
Yeah.
You're like, wasn't that was amazing?
Such an adventure.
Yeah, but when that other person is a horse, it's a whole. I used to go after the show to the stables and.
Did you?
Yeah,
to go and connect with your horse. Like, what about that?
And the horse is like. So just give him a carrot,
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And had you had experience horse riding previously?
So David Atkins, who directed the whole thing, we'd done hair for the production company. And he said to me halfway through the rehearsals for that, he said, can you ride a horse? And as I said to him, I learnt when I was a kid, I did like back in England, I did like a week-long holiday sort of thing. I wasn't very good. And then I said, I learnt when I was a kid, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've ridden a horse since.
Yeah.
But I'm a fast learner and I'm not scared.
Yeah.
And so he went, great, well, in fact, it was, the Heath Ledger, Ned Kelly movie was being filmed in Melbourne at the time.
Same time.
And so I went out to wherever that was and rode a horse with the horse master for an hour.
Yeah.
And then she phoned over and she said, he'll be fine. He needs to
practice.
Yeah, so as soon as hair finished, I flew up to Sydney and went straight. And my teacher was Steve Jeffries, who was the guy who rode out in, the Olympic Games when the guy rode out and reared up to start.
Such an iconic moment.
Yeah, well, our show started the same way.
Yes.
Same guy, same horse.
Wow.
So he was my teacher. So I had excellent teachers. Yeah.
Oh, fascinating. Have you ever had a moment in your career where you've thought maybe you'd go into a different industry, or have you always sort of just stuck with it?
No, I had a period. So I went to I moved back to London. I did the international tour of Les Misérables, which was another amazing experience. And because I was born in London, I didn't move to Australia till I was 10 when we moved to Perth. And so I always had this feeling of, not that I don't belong here, but I was like, there was some aspect of me that I put down to being British.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always knew that I was going to go back.
Yep.
And because I'd been on the road for 9 months, because we travelled Southeast Asia and South Africa with Les Mis, I thought I'm going to keep going.
Right.
So that's when I went back to England. And I was away for about 12 years.
Wow.
All up. I came back for 2 years in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the middle, but sort of 3/4 of the way through, and that's when I did Hair and Man from Snowy River, and then I'd sort of ticked
that off.
I'd ticked a lot of the boxes
Mm-hmm.
of what I went to England to do, including like film and TV. I'd done a lot of film and TV as well, and also discovered I'm not British. I'm Australian. I'm proud to be Australian. And so I came back to Perth. In fact, I was booked to come back because my dad was not well, and I thought I'm not having a great time here because I sort of, as I said, I ticked the boxes and couldn't see my way to the next
Mm-hmm.
level, and so it wasn't, my agent would ring and go, "Do you want to audition for this?" And I'd be like, "Not really."
Right.
Which, when you're not creatively inspired, all of a sudden London's not as bright and shiny as it was, and the lifestyle over there is not what it is here.
Yeah.
We're so lucky here.
We are so lucky here.
And so I thought, well, my dad's dying. I'm here. I'm going to go back and be with him in Perth, and then work out, what's next. And unfortunately, just before I was due to fly back, he passed away. Mm. So then I raced back for the funeral and everything.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, that's tough.
Thank you. We all go through it in various ways at some point. And so then my reason really for being back was not there anymore. I mean, I was sorting out his estate and all of that, but he wasn't there. So I had to go, well, I don't feel like going back to London though, so what am I doing? And so then I started to think about, well, is there anything else I could do? Because if there is, I can live in Perth. You can't really live in Perth and be an actor, of any
to really make a living.
Make a living. And so I thought, if there's something else I can do, I can live here. That's when I really started writing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
One kind of irregular income source to another. I didn't do accounting or anything, or merchant banking. And then what happened was a friend of mine who I'd been doing corporate gigs with a company called Incognito Artists was owned and run still by this New Zealand guy, Jeff Sewell, who lived in London. But he was a bit of a celebrity in New Zealand because he also had a group called Amici.
Ah, yes.
Amici Forever.
Yes.
and they had a couple of hits, sort of opera type stuff. And he was doing a concert tour of New Zealand, but he said he pitched it as not just him. What about Jeff Saul and Incognito artists? And he contacted me and said, you want to come and do this tour? And it was like 10 concerts around New Zealand with all my friends,
How great.
And so I thought, that's good. And I went and did that, and I was like, I'm never not going to be in this industry. And in fact, my time out of the industry was just an aspect of my time in the industry. That was my out of the industry period. You know what I mean?
Totally. Your era in the Taylor Swift.
Right.
Your Taylor Swift era of being out of the industry.
That's it, yeah. So I then came back to Perth and went, right, I'm going to Sydney.
Yeah.
I'm not going back to London, but I can't be here. And so, sorted out my dad's affairs and everything, and got in the car and drove across the Nullarbor.
Wow.
Which was great. Yeah.
And you've been in Sydney since then?
Yes.
As your base?
Yeah. I actually, timing, Lisa Adam was doing the Jersey Boys tour, and she said, I need someone to rent my room in Clovelly. And so I went, fantastic. And so I was there, and then it was during that time that I reconnected with Peter.
You're now partner of how long?
My wife. That was our first date.
Yes.
How's this? Our first actual official date was the 12th of September 2009, which was the opening night of Wicked in Sydney.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I was there at your first date.
You were. We came to see you.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so – well, I'm honoured to be part of your story.
Yes, I appreciate it.
Because your beautiful Peter ended up coming to our wedding, in fact, Chris and my wedding.
Yes.
And, we've known you both separately, my husband Chris and I. So I'm just stoked to be part of that part of your story too.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so special. Marty, because we are the on-air snack bar podcast, do you have a favourite post-show snack?
Well, I try to stay away from carbs post-show. Well, evening post-show. So it tends to be some sort of soup or of some kind, or I do every now and then I'll do like noodles, and maybe with a gin and tonic or something.
Sounds delicious. Martin Cruz, it has been a delight. Thank you so much for coming on air Snack Bar Podcast.
It's been great.
The curtain has fallen for today's episode, but subscribe on YouTube and follow the On Air Snack Bar channels on Spotify, Audible, Apple Podcasts to stay tuned for all the latest updates. We will be back next week with more exclusive interviews from the world of Australian theatre. Until then, keep on snacking.